Hi everyone, it's Cindy with Twisted Truths, and how you guys all doing? This is about Fotis and Jennifer Dulos. She went missing in May of 2019, and then he committed suicide after being arrested for her murder last year. Now police are following up on old leads, they said, and they're back on his property in New Canaan, Connecticut. So there's speculation that his attorney is rolling on his mistress. And that's why they're there digging up the property, trying to find Jennifer's body. It's just scary. This video is more or less a timeline and a recap of things I've done in the past, so you can see a timeline of events leading up to this.
Good afternoon, sir. I know you've already been previously advised in your prior arrangements, but I'm going to formally advise you now. You do have the right to remain silent concerning these new charges, and the statements you make could potentially be used against you in court. You have the right to plead not guilty to these charges and went to trial in front of a judge or a jury. You have the right to a public and a speedy trial. At a trial, you may respond and cross-examine the witnesses against you, summon witnesses, testify on your behalf, and offer any defenses you might make. In any criminal trials, the state's burden to prove you guilty beyond all reasonable doubt. You are entitled to have counsel. The counsel has filed a full appearance on your behalf. As a person held in custody, you're entitled to reasonable bail set by the court. You should also be aware that if you're not an American citizen, sir, you run the risk of conviction of deportation, exclusion from admission to the United States, or denial of naturalization pursuant to the laws of the United States. If you have any questions about your constitutional rights, speak to the court now or confer privately with counsel. You understand your rights, sir?
I do. Judge, Attorney Jen Guinness is here. She filed an appearance for Mrs. Farber and the children. Is the victim's family. The clerks have a protective order that I'd ask you to order also as a condition of the defendant's release. As far as bond goes, Your Honor, I believe that the bond is set by the court of $6 million is appropriate in this matter. I would ask that you order that the defendant makes bond, that you keep the IPS, GPS with house arrest, and any conditions the court deems appropriate. Additionally, I ask that you enter the protective order as a condition, that he have no contact with Mrs. Farber or the children through third parties or himself, and any other conditions that the court deems appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I hear your bond argument, counsel, I know you're an experienced practitioner. Have you had a chance to review the proposed protective order?
I have not, but we're aware of the nature of the order and its practical effect.
Therefore, I will give you, I'll formally issue it upon arraignment. What's your bond argument, counsel?
Judge, we think that $6 million is excessive. We're asking for a bond of $1 million. And here's why. Mr. Dulos was arrested in June of this year and that fact set before the world that accused him effectively of murder. He made a $500,000 bond, was fully compliant with the court's orders. Additional charges arose after additional evidence took place, again charging with hindering and making what we think are extraordinary allegations about what state police believe and so forth. We waited for months in anticipation for this warrant, wanting to see whether these beliefs would be produced or supported by fact. And the warrant we read last night offers us perishingly little that differs and advances a new theory of the case. Prior to yesterday, the motive was Mr. Dulos did this to extinguish his wife to end a bitter divorce. Now it's to gain control of the trust fund. The case is actually charged in the alternative. It's either murder or it's felony murder arising out of a kidnapping. As to the strengths of the state's case, I think the state is still groping in the dark, grasping at straws, and it has thrown now a dart at Mr. Dulos, which has landed. He has been fully compliant with your orders and is out, or was until yesterday, on a $1 million bond. We received information from a credible source that he was about to be arrested. I traveled to his home, arriving before the state police, and brokered a friendly transaction. It was tense and sorrowful, as you can imagine such a thing would be, but he cooperated even there. Although he has substantial ties to Greece and family, he's known now throughout the world thanks to the publicity in this case, and I suspect 80% of the folks in this courtroom are reporters. There's a bank of cameras, the likes of which I've never seen outside the courtroom. This is an extraditable offense. He's going to be on house arrest with GPS and electronic monitoring. I do not believe him to be a flight risk. He has been compliant with the orders. There's been but one dust-up with respect to the electronic order, the electronic monitoring. I believe he crossed state lines at some point in the area of New Bedford. I may be wrong about that town, but upon investigation, probation determined that that was inadvertent on a twisting state route. So we think an additional $1 million bond is sufficient. I can count on one hand the number of cases in which I've seen the bond larger than that. In my career over the last 30 years involving murder, and those were typically for gangbangers or people directing criminal enterprises. The state believes he engineered and caused his wife's death. We don't. We're anxious for the trial. We're relieved by the allegations in the warrant. If that's all the state has, we're confident about trial, and Mr. Dulos has no interest in flight. He has every interest in fighting this case and reclaiming his reputation. So we believe an additional $1 million reflects the seriousness of the offense, that would yield a cumulative bond of $2 million. And so our request is for a $1 million bond.
Good afternoon. We understand you guys want information, but this investigation is very preliminary at this point, and there's only so much that we can release, okay? Today at about 11:54 hours this morning, officers from the Farmington Police Department were asked to respond to Mr. Dulos' residence for a well-being check because he was late for a court appearance today. When officers responded, they could see through a window that Mr. Dulos was sitting in his vehicle and he had obvious signs of medical distress. Officers forced entry and immediately began to perform life-saving measures. Medics responded from the East Farmington Fire Department, Yukon Health, and AMR Ambulance to assist with those life-saving measures. Mr. Dulos was transported to Yukon Health by ambulance, where he is now listed as critical condition. This is a cooperative investigation with the Farmington Police Department, the Connecticut State Police, and the Connecticut State's Attorney's Office. Again, very preliminary right now. The investigation is just beginning, and we expect to have an update later this evening.
Was there a note at all that might have indicated that this was a suicide attempt?
Yes, it's way too early for us to confirm any of that right now.
We heard he was in a helicopter going somewhere from Yukon. Can you confirm any of that, or is he still at Yukon, you're saying now?
I at this point, he is still at Yukon Health, yes.
Can you talk about what he might be being treated for?
Carbon monoxide poisoning.
And what was the original call that led authorities to this property?
Just to check on his whereabouts and his well-being, because he did not show up for a court appearance today. He was late.
We saw a woman here on the property. She was here earlier this morning around 11:20. She was here for about 10 minutes, and then we saw another woman here on the property. I mean, can you give any indication? I believe it was the same woman. Can you give us any indication who she might have been?
I can't right now. It is too early in the investigation. Again, we expect to have some updates later this evening.
She is with detectives.
You said carbon monoxide was in the garage or in the house we saw through a window?
He was located in his garage in his vehicle.
Okay.
What kind of medical treatment was he given here at the scene?
Typical life-saving measures, CPR.
Anyone else?
And when you, when these life-saving measures were going on, I know my coworker Courtney Zeller was watching this all unfold. I think she counted about 10 minutes that this was happening. I mean, at what point was there a sign of life that you were then able to transport him? I mean, what was that effort like for you guys?
Typically, CPR will be performed for a period of time. If there is any type of life present, the patient would be transported to the hospital, and that's what happened today. I don't have the exact time of when they determined whether or not Mr. Dulos had any signs of life.
I'm Taylor DeCello from Fox 61. Are they going to be keeping him at Yukon Health Center?
So
Yeah.
his medical condition you're going to have to get from Yukon. They may do an update later on working with the chief here in Farmington Police, but anything medical, I know you guys want to know, but we really can't comment. Right now, these guys are here trying to button up the scene and keep things moving here. So as far as hospital information, medical information, severity and such, critical condition, maybe we'll have some updates later, hopefully.
How much
for you.
longer are you planning on being here at the scene?
We expect to be here for a few hours, and that will depend on where the investigation leads.
Can either of you talk about what actually is happening here at the scene?
So, go ahead.
At the scene right now,
Yeah.
yes, we are. How do we say this? We're investigating. Detectives are interviewing witnesses, and there are some legal considerations that are taking place right now, and we're working through those legalities, and that's part of the investigation.
And are you looking at anything in particular aside from what happened today, or are you focused specifically on what happened today, or can your investigatory measures go outside of that?
Good question. That's kind of why we're being assisted by the Connecticut State Police, and we'll see where that investigation leads. It's very beginning right now, so I don't know where it'll go yet.
Was anyone else in the house?
Mr. Dulos was alone when officers located
And
him.
what time did you guys get to the house?
We got here about maybe noon, probably noon. I know it was 11:54 we got the call, so probably around noon.
Are you able to comment at all whether he, at one point, he didn't have a pulse at all?
No, and that's part of the immediate life-saving measures. Okay, that's officers on scene determined, CPR was needed, and that was what was performed.
So you say no, you can't comment on that? Is that what you meant by no?
No, I can't comment.
Are you expected to give another?
We
press
expect
conference
later this evening, once we have some more information to share with all of you. Again, we know you all want some info, and we are doing our best.
Now, after
We
this,
saw a Lifestar helicopter landing at Yukon Health. Is he being transferred by Lifestar from Yukon Health?
Again, you're going to have to get confirmation from Yukon Health, okay? And any medical updates will have to come from them.
now, after this unfolded today, did you check in with the two other people that were charged in connection to this case? I know that Kent Malini is behind bars, but what about Michelle Troconis, who too is out on bond?
Let me handle that. So there's still a gag order in place, unfortunately, on the previous investigation. Obviously, they're both impacted by each other. And obviously, the Connecticut State Police Major Crimes detectives are doing their best with the state's attorney, one, to respect all legalities here. Currently, right now, they're just holding the scene to determine what happened, and then they'll move forward. But there's still a gag order going on.
And once again, my name is Taylor from Fox 61.
Hi, Taylor.
Was there a suicide note left?
It's still, the investigation is way too early for that. They haven't even gotten in and processed anything yet, if they're even going to. So, again, they're just holding the scene right now.
And has the Farber Dulos family, has their kids, Gloria Farber, have they been notified about what's been going on?
That would be something that the detectives would initiate at some point. You guys are doing a fairly thorough job of covering it to this point, so I guess they're going to have a decent amount of information at this point. But obviously, in any crime, any type of crime like this or any investigation, detectives are going to work closely with the family as much as possible and keep them informed. That's their first point of contact, is usually with the family.
How long you guys be out here for?
It's going to be a while, fellas. It'll hit your evening news.
How will we know when you do the update?
We'll get the word out ahead of time.
Chief Melanson's great with the Farmington Police Department. Fantastic. He'll have some information or something put out for you later.
Do you know about what time this evening?
No, not this time.
Good. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Okay. Good afternoon. We understand you guys want information, but this investigation is very preliminary at this point, and there's only so much that we can release. Okay. Today at about 11:54 hours this morning, officers from the Farmington Police Department were asked to respond to Mr. Dulos' residence for a well-being check because he was late for a court appearance today. When officers responded, they could see through a window that Mr. Dulos was sitting in his vehicle and he had obvious signs of medical distress. Officers forced entry and immediately began to perform life-saving measures. Medics responded from the East Farmington Fire Department, Yukon Health, and AMR ambulance to assist with those life-saving measures. Mr. Dulos was transported to Yukon Health by ambulance, where he is now listed as critical condition. This is a cooperative investigation with the Farmington Police Department, the Connecticut State Police, and the Connecticut State's Attorney's Office. Again, very preliminary right now. The investigation is just beginning, and we expect to have an update later this evening.
Was there a note at all that might have indicated that this was a suicide attempt?
Yes, it's way too early for us to confirm any of that right now.
We heard he was in a helicopter going somewhere from Yukon. Can you confirm any of that, or is he still at Yukon, you're saying now?
I at this point, he is still at Yukon Health, yes.
Can you talk about what he might be being treated for?
Carbon monoxide poisoning.
And what was the original call that led authorities to this property?
Just to check on his whereabouts.
Okay, so police did say that he had attached a hose to the exhaust pipe of his Suburban. And this is the picture flipped, so you can see it better You can see a hose coming off of his exhaust. So obviously, he really thought this out. So yesterday, rescue teams did about 10 minutes, I think they said, of a CPR on scene. He was totally unresponsive. They rushed him to the hospital, then he was life-flighted. Today, he's reportedly in critical and dire condition. Apparently, he had contacted a bail bondsman yesterday morning at 9:30 in the morning because an emergency bond hearing was scheduled, and I think they were going to revoke his $6 million bail. That's what I've read. Allegedly, the properties that he used to secure the bail two of them were in foreclosure, and so this was rescheduled. So today, even though he's in the hospital, Stanford Superior Court moved forward with the bond hearing. His attorney feels personally responsible for this, according to the Stanford Advocate. Farmington Police, at the time that I made this, were still trying to secure a search warrant, and it was unclear what crime they would cite for legal authority to search Dulos' home. Currently, when I made this video, there was no suicide note. But then this came out this afternoon. A Stanford Superior Court judge issued 3 warrants today for the rearrest of Fotis Dulos. His attorney confirmed Dulos is in dire condition. The situation is grim. Mr. Dulos is hospitalized. We are hoping that he will recover. His attorney had waived extradition proceedings, so his family could have access to him at the hospital. The judge ordered the rearrest warrants because of a failure to appear in court on Tuesday. Well, duh. According to WINH, Connecticut State Police did get a search warrant, and they're at his home. Even though he's dying in the hospital, I feel really bad for both families, and I'm praying for the children. Thanks, guys. Keep you posted. Bye.
Sir, listen carefully. I'm issuing the following protective order because the nature and circumstances of this murder qualify this as a family violence crime, which allows the court to issue this protective order, and it will remain in effect until further order of the court. So with respect to the protected parties, that includes GF with a residence in Manhattan, as well as 5 minor individuals whose names I'm not going to read, but whose names and dates of birth are on this order. With respect to all of those parties, you are not having any contact with those protected parties in any manner. That includes by writing, electronic, or telephone. No texting, no Facebook, no social media. Do not contact their home, workplace, or anyone else with whom contact would cause them annoyance or alarm. You must stay away from the homes of the protected parties and wherever they may reside. Do not assault, threaten, abuse, harass, follow, interfere with, or stalk the protected parties. You must not possess any firearms or ammunition, so if you are in possession of any firearms or ammunition under the terms of this protective order, such items have to be surrendered or transferred to the Farmington or State Police, as the case may be, while this order remains in effect. You are to stay 100 yards away from the protected parties. So, do you understand all the different terms of the protective order, sir?
I do.
Will you obey?
I will.
Give a copy to the defendant. If you have any questions, please speak to your attorney or talk to family relations. Well, counsel, I'm well aware of your position as to the disappearance of Jennifer Dulos, the mother of your client's 5 children. Your arguments as to his lack of involvement in Jennifer's disappearance have not changed since his first arrest for evidence tampering last summer. However, what has changed since then is the new charges of murder and kidnapping and related charges which bring him here today. In addition, the quantity of the evidence against the defendant and its exposure to incarceration in the event of a conviction have all gone up substantially. And the nature of the bond is to ensure appearance in court. The amount of the bond must also match the gravity of the offenses charged. I believe that the bond at $6 million is appropriate. In the event your client does post that bond, he is to remain under house arrest during the pendency of these proceedings, IPS and GPS monitoring. He has been compliant with the GPS monitoring according to the Office of Adult Probation. I expect that to continue. He is to not leave the parameters of his home without permission for Jefferson Crossing address, except for medical appointments, church services, and meetings with defense counsel.
Judge, we discussed in chambers the potential for his obtaining approval to leave the premises for work-related purposes. I don't know whether you have considered that and rejected it, or if that was inadvertent.
State's position?
I think similar to the co-defendant, Mr. Lenny, Your Honor, I don't believe it's appropriate.
Well, on a case-by-case basis, but I think that's the danger is the exception would swallow up the rule, because he's an independent contractor, as I understand, and you could argue a trip to Home Depot would be something work-related. So I'm going to make that on a case-by-case basis, but if I feel there's been any abuse of the condition, I'm going to have another hearing where I will impose more strict conditions if you guys post that bond. So, sir, bottom line is you not have any contact with the co-defendants, obey the protective order, don't leave the state of Connecticut without permission, surrender your passport, take medical appointments, church services, meeting with counsel, and work-related appointments and visits are permitted under this. But
with prior approval, Your Honor?
Prior approval of the supervising probation officer, I believe in your case it's a Mr. Jeffrey Coffey. So that is the court's order. I did speak briefly to counsel. We've agreed upon a new date.
Judge, before that, I neglected to ask that he also have no contact with the nanny that's been with his children, Lauren Almeida. So if we can make that a condition of his release also, not to have any contact with her.
Well, we would object to that insofar as it may apply to us as his agents. She's a witness, and we may well reach out to her.
They can reach out, and she could say, I don't want to talk to you, but I don't want attorney. I believe Your Honor could order that Attorney Dulos, Mr. Dulos, not have any contact with her, and that's what I'm asking for.
I understand the distinction. I think that you're fine with us, but yes, Attorney Pattis, I'm not trying to prohibit you from mounting a defense to these charges, but your client is not to have any contact with his children's nanny or home nanny. So ordered. February.
Your Honor, we talked about February 28th as a continuance date. I spoke to counsel about waiving the HPC. They indicated they don't want to waive it or not able to do it today. So I'd asked that any continuance be charged to them, and I'd asked that Mr. Dulos' case that was down for the 9th be continued to the February 28th date.
Yes, sir. Right, this is the matter of State of Connecticut versus Michelle Triconis. Counsel, identify yourself for the record, please.
Richard Colangelo for the State, Your Honor.
Yes. Andrew Good afternoon. Good afternoon, ma'am. I know we have met before. State?
Judge, in looking at this matter, I believe the bond is set by the court at $2 million is appropriate. If the defendant is to make that bond, I'd ask that you do the GPS IPS with house arrest only to leave for things that the court deems appropriate, with that no contact with co-defendants or Mr. Dulos' family.
Your Honor, I have filed a motion for reduction of bond.
Yes, you may be heard.
And I would ask that the court set the bond at $500,000. That would be a total of $1.1 million. She has never failed to make an appearance. She's in full compliance with all the conditions of the court. She is charged with conspiracy. She had no benefit from the disappearance of Jennifer Dulos. I would ask the court to set the bond at $500,000.
Well, the defendant has been compliant with her conditions of release. The warrants indicate some level of cooperation with the authority level, and she has been compliant. As I said, there's been no GPS changes. She continues to charge the device appropriately, no issues according to the Office of Adult Probation. Therefore, the court will set bond at $1.5 million for the defendant with the condition of house arrest. The only exceptions will be for medical appointments, church services, and meetings with defense counsel. No contact with the co-defendant. She He already is on that, and so that will.
We need to
remain.
reorder it, Judge.
Pardon?
When she came into corrections, they cut off any GPS
All right,
monitoring.
well, that has to be reinstalled, and thank you for letting me know that. So, the new bracelet, but with the more restrictive parameters.
IPS as well?
IPS, GPS.
Counsel and I discussed February 7th in Part A for her next court date. I'd ask Your Honor to order her other case continued from the 31st to the 7th also, please.
Right, these are proceedings, vendor package, moved, so that's what I agree, Counsel?
Yes, Your Honor.
So ordered, so ordered, thank you.
Thank you.